Hello and welcome to Learn Spanish a lo Boricua. Today is a class on the conversation from the previous episode. In episode 9, we talked about el cine y la nostalgia de Super Mario Bros. So today I'm going to be going over the vocab that we used and talking a little bit about grammar. I took the first couple episodes of this podcast to talk about the main features of Puerto Rican pronunciation. You can always go back and listen to that. I did have a pronunciation piece as part of this class, but since the pronunciation stays consistent, then we don't need to continually talk about the dropping of the S's, the dropping of the D, how the R sometimes becomes L. Okay, you can hear examples of that in the actual conversation that we have, as well as in the earlier episodes, if you'd like to go back and have more of a closer look at some of the patterns of pronunciation here in Puerto Rico. As always, I recommend that you watch today's episode because you need to have the visual piece as you're learning vocab and grammar in order for it to really grab on to your brain, or your brain to grab on to it. The link to view this class on YouTube is right there in the podcast description. Go ahead and click on it. Please subscribe to my channel on YouTube. Give the video a like. You can leave a comment too if you have any, sort of thoughts, things you want to react with. I think the episode about food would have been a good one as well for some people to chime in. So love to hear from you. Drop us a comment in YouTube, or I believe in Spotify. You can do that in Apple. You could leave a review, and that would help us to get this podcast out to more people. Alrighty then, let's jump into it. I'm so excited about the vocab that we're going to go over today. I really feel like today was one of the best representations we've had so far in this podcast of really natural vocab and phrases that come up when you're conversational and in Puerto Rico. So we'll take a look at those, and then grammar piece, we're going to look at a number of examples of the subjunctive. I am convinced that students that work with me are going to use the subjunctive correctly because you need it. You need it more than you need future tense, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Let's get into it. Vocab. So the first part of our conversation was all about the Super Mario Brothers movie, as well as sort of the games as we were growing up, etc. So we'll look at that first chunk of vocab related to that. Then we'll talk about, we got into the part of John Wick movie, and finally my little commentary on the series we're watched with three best friends from different countries that all speak different languages. And I wanted to say at the beginning, of course, I think that for beginners, it's best to start with this class and then listen to the conversation, because you will have learned a lot of the vocab. You're getting a lot of the context as I go over things here. So you'll feel less frustrated listening, and you'll be able to pick up a couple words, which is really exciting. Oh, I got that. I heard that. Or it's also just another reinforcement of that new vocab word in your brain, another synapse that's created, another connection to that little seed in your brain of that word. So I know that's what I'm doing right now with Italian. As I listen, I have to read a transcript as I'm listening, and I have to work through it and translate, etc. But there are certain words that I can recognize, and it feels really exciting to be able to hear that and know what it is that's being said. So if you're a beginner, you might want to start here and then listen to episode 9. If you're intermediate, listen to the conversation we had, watch the class, listen to the conversation again. And if you're advanced, you can listen to the conversation and take what you need from this class. Okay, let's start with the very most basic, which is the verb ver. I think that we learn ver and mirar when we're starting off in the language. And I know that for me personally, I had the impression that Spanish was a little bit more flexible with verbs like ver, mirar, escuchar, y oír. That you could use them, that escuchar and oír could both be used for like to listen or to hear, and that mirar and ver as well, the lines were kind of blurry. Whereas in English, it's very defined what we say to see. I wouldn't say I was seeing my phone. That has to be I was looking at my phone. We wouldn't say I was seeing this show. We'd say I was watching this show. So we have very specific vocab in regards to those senses and what exactly it refers to, as well as with listening versus hearing. Hearing almost sounds like a passive thing, right? I heard something, or listening is active. But at least in Puerto Rico, I don't know how this works in other places, and this podcast is not about general Spanish. Qué rico. It's specifically about what I know to be true. You will use ver for anything related to television, series, a YouTube video you watched, something, anything that you would say watch or to see in Puerto Rico is going to be the verb ver, okay? And what I've given you here is past tense conjugations. Vi, I saw. Viste, you saw or watched. Vio, he, she, or usted watched or saw. Vimos, nosotros watched or saw. Vieron, ustedes, ellos, ellas watched or saw. Okay, so this is, a full lesson on preterite tense. Always, for more information on grammar, you can join my Spanish with Kara community, where I have lots of live classes and ways to practice your grammar, doing the most important part of language learning, which is practicing speaking. So you can jump into the community and learn more. But here is the quick guide to ver in the past tense. So you're going to hear over and over again, vi, viste, vimos, in this episodio, because you're going to be, we'll be talking about we saw, I saw, did you see this, etc. So there they are. Mirar is to look at or look. It's like when somebody's saying, mira eso, look at that. Mira esto. If it's in my hand, I can use this to look at this. Okay, so use ver for all things related to watching videos, movies, etc. La fiebre. Right off the jump, we had a great term that's used here in Puerto Rico. La fiebre means fever, but it's also used for that feeling you get when you have something new and you're obsessed with using it, whatever it might be, right? You're just obsessed with that, with what's out. It's called la fiebre, they say. So when I first learned this, I remember my friend Kelly and her husband explained it like, and their girls played video games too. So if you get a new video game and, you're thinking about it at school, you can't wait to get home and play, tienes la fiebre de ese videojuego. You can't wait to sit down and start playing. Or if you're watching a new series as well and you get hooked, te juqueas, because juquear. Let me show you guys that. That's pretty fun. Juquear, which is spelled like this, which is a juqueado, or it might be actually, sorry, J, juqueado. I imagine that it can exist both ways. Since it's taken from English, they might use the H, even though, the H is silent, but sometimes it's kind of flexible spelling wise, but I know I've definitely seen it with J, so I'm gonna go with that one. Juquear, this could also be changed to juquear, and juqueado, I'm hooked on something. Quite convenient to have that cognate, that bit of Spanglish, because we always say I'm hooked quite a bit. That's the idea, is being hooked on something, is la fiebre. Okay, besides the fact that, yes, it's used like normal if you have an actual temperature fever. Okay, la repercusión, you will have heard Alfredo use that quite a few times in this episode, which of course sounds like repercussions, but also can refer to an impact, the impact that this movie is having around the world. Okay, la repercusión. That's what your brain's going to say repercussion, which doesn't really, it sounds to me in my mind as like a consequence. So yes, it can be used in that context, but here it's referring to impact. Know that it also has that meaning. El elenco, we're talking about their star-studded cast is the word for cast, elenco. Los 90, so glad this came up. This came up last night in my conversation class as well. You always use los, and then you don't put, you don't do anything to 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. The only numbers that change gender are hundreds. So I would say 200 horas, 200 hours. That's talking about the yoga teacher training. That's something that comes up. But you don't make numbers like 10, 20, 30, 40. You don't make them plural. 40 is what you're referring to, even though we think 90s. It does not change. And the reason why we're using los is because you're referring to los años 90. Okay, but you drop that. Los 90 equals the 90s. So how would you say the 60s? Los 60. I give you a countdown of 3 there. Those who are just listening didn't see that. That bit of silence was me counting down 3 seconds. How would you say the 50s? Los 50. How would you say the 80s? Los 80. Correct. You've got it. Acaparar. So Alfredo mentioned this about how they're trying to acaparar todos los juegos that were associated with Mario. I wanted to look at this because I've seen this. The way he used it is one of the definitions that I don't immediately associate acaparar with. I think of acaparar as to stockpile or to hoard. Estoy acaparando la conversación, I'm like hogging all of this conversation, something like that. To monopolize, to corner, to hog, but also to capture. So that's what he was reusing it as in this context. What they were able to capture all these different games and different scenes that they had throughout the movie. Okay, so acaparar, to capture. Okay. See, and some things, of course, that aren't like direct translation. Good word to have, acaparar. Al parecer, you would have heard Alfredo say, and another phrase that means the same is por lo visto. A lot of people, because you know that, you may or may not know, that the ly endings in Spanish, ly, is typically a mente ending. I'm sorry, ly endings in English are typically mente in Spanish, right? Like exactly is exactamente. Totally is totalmente. Definitely is definitivamente. But aparentemente, yes, is a word, but there's a easier way for that to roll off the tongue, and that's typically what native speakers use anyway, which is al parecer or por lo visto. Por lo visto, al parecer, they're easier to say than aparentemente, and they're more common. So use these two for apparently. Okay, Argentina e Inglesa. This is when I was talking about the actress that played Peach or that voiced Peach. Argentina e Inglesa. I can't remember if we've gone over this yet in this podcast, but let's talk about why the word and, which is the letter Y, right? E turns into A, okay? Which is this for the same reason that A turns into an in English when it is in front of a vowel, right? A word that starts with a vowel. So we would say an onion, an apple. We don't say onion or apple because the sound of the word kind of gets swallowed by the next vowel. We need something that forms like a break between these two sounds. You can clearly hear an onion, right? Because the way native speakers speak is that all of the words flow together. You'll notice that I'm not breaking between words. Sounds incredibly unnatural to do that. An onion is how this naturally would come off an apple. So what happens with when you have the word and in front of a word that starts with, I just got auto-corrected. Let me show them, okay? Let me take them through the process. Word, damn it. When you have the word E in front of a word that's going to make an E sound, which includes anything that starts with HI, as well as any word that starts with just regular I, right? Because the H is silent, so this sounds like hijo. Say that. Hijo, 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 because when you're speaking at a faster speed, which eventually will come because you are practicing your speaking often, then those two sounds will not be distinguishable. Hijo, madre, hijo. You can't tell that there was an E in there. So what Spanish does is they change the word and into a when it's before E so that we can hear the difference, just like we change a into an before a vowel. So madre, the time where you most see this, madre e hijo. That's why it auto-corrected me there. It can't be madre hijo. Madre, hijo. This is why it had to be, when I said it, Argentina e Inglesa. Argentina e Inglesa. If it would have been e Inglesa, look, it's even going to auto-correct me there if I do that. The other time that this happens, y'all, is with the word O, or with the word or. Not the, oh, it's not a word, it's a letter. The letter O, which means or, will turn into a U whenever the word following starts with O. Best example of this is una manera o otra. Because what would it sound like? Una manera otra. You can't hear that I said the word or in there. So we're going to change this to U. Una manera u otra. Una manera u otra. One way or another, I'm gonna get you. Just reminds me of Rugrats. Every time I sing that. Okay, una manera u otra is the best phrase for your brain to remember this structure. Plus, it's a phrase that you would say one way or another. Una manera u otra. Okay, so practice that. That'll be your example of how o, the word or, turns into u when it's in front of the letter O, or when it's in front of what? An H-O, you got it, like hombre, or el hombro. Es este hombro u, oh no, it wouldn't be u otro. U el otro, there, o el otro. Es mujer u hombre. Because we're not going to do hombre the same way that we wouldn't do e hijo. The H needs to be basically deleted from your mind there because it's silent. So we need to create some separation of sounds there. Okay, es mujer o hombre. So now you know. When you see the letter E hanging out by itself, it means and. It's just a spell change to avoid that combining of sounds. All right, then we moved into the part of the conversation we're talking about John Wick. Alfredo mentioned la cartelera. La cartelera would be the marquee, the billboard. Think of a typical movie theater that has that sort of awning, and on the awning you see the current movies that are listed. So that's la cartelera, marquee, the billboard. I'm so glad. I imagine that we might have said this before. Rayos is quite common, but Alfredo said it today, and I was like, I've got to write that down. In the episode 9, he said it. Rayos. Try it with me. Rayos. This I use all the time, or just simply the sound ea. You have to realize that in a different language, none of your sounds stay the same. I don't say whoopsie, or I do still say wow. You know, that's used universally pretty much in Spanish. What's another example? Ooh. In Puerto Rico, they don't use ooh. In other countries, they don't use ooh. It's something different used here, but the sound ooh is not like a universal sound for something being gross, okay? In France, it's like ooh la la, right? In Puerto Rico, for saying something gross would be full, F-O, full. And ella is what you do, kind of like when I would say dang. Se usa para expresar asombro. So it's used to express surprise or amazement, but it seems like to me a good place for dang or damn. I use this when I have to cover the Pilates class. I don't love Pilates. I'm a yoga teacher, okay? I'm a yoga teacher and dancer. I don't love Pilates. When I have to teach Pilates, it's kind of painful. And some of the things that we do make me say, yeah, damn. Pica, it stings, it burns, as we would say, maybe in English, about in a group fitness class, which like over exercise type of situation. Okay, so ea rayos is like, whoa, rayos. And kind of, I feel like I've ever seen it like, what the hell? Ea rayos. But yes, either just the sound ea or ea rayos is a super common phrase here to express surprise, and think of it in places where you would use dang or damn. Okay, que parecía de embuste, another excellent one. I'm so glad. I've spent 3 weeks learning Italian and I'm already here with my hands like, embuste. Okay, parecía de embuste. So que parecía de embuste means that seemed fake. Que parecía de embuste. It seemed fake. The word, we got to look at embuste and de embuste. Okay, embuste, which more sound like embuste. Embuste. In Puerto Rico is lie. So it took me a bit of time to rewire wanting to react with mentira. I do that a lot in classes when I tell them to do something. Wait, just kidding. Wait, no, lies. I wanted to do something different right here. So my reaction was to say mentira for a while. Now I've gotten more used to what's commonly used here is embuste. Embuste means lie. Un embuste is masculine. Okay, embuste. Embustero is how you call somebody a liar. Embustero. Liar. This is used jokingly to, you know, let's say you're very much in using Alfredo and I as the example. Let's say he was talking about something that a habit of mine that drives him kind of crazy, and he will talk about what I do. And if I want to be like, no, that's BS, something like that. Embustero, it can be definitely used in that joking tone as well. Embustero. When you say something is de embuste, it means fake. Okay, dientes de embuste is how you'd say like fake teeth, or I mean, dentures has an official name, but it could refer to that as well. Dientes de embuste, or un bigote de embuste would be a fake mustache. De embuste in Puerto Rico means fake. Embuste means lie. Embustero means liar. Okay. All right, he talked about Keanu Reeves being underrated, devaluado. Devaluado. I'm sorry, friends. I need to check my spelling on that. I wonder if there's two E's. Devaluado. Devaluado. Nope, devaluado. Okay, everything's fine. I was right. Thank God. Okay, devaluado means underrated. Sobrevaluado means overrated. Devaluado, evaluar, values, to rate something or value something. So, or evaluate, right? Devaluado, underrated. Sobrevaluado, overrated. Great ones to have. Of course, if you were talking about a woman, this would be devaluada, sobrevaluada. I have to change these adjectives to match what it is they're describing. El cuco, again, another one that came up. El cuco, you'll hear people talking in Puerto Rico about el cuco. That is how to say the boogeyman. Boogeyman, right? Something you use with kids. And that is used in their lullaby, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see if I can come up with it. Duérmete, niño, duérmete ya. Hoy te comerá. I'm going to look it up. The lyrics were obviously not all in there, but it's duérmete, niño, duérmete ya. Something. Viene el cuco y te comerá. The boogeyman will eat you. You know, that's what, I can't think of anything sweeter to fall asleep to. Duérmete, niño. Niño, duérmete ya. There it is. Que viene el cuco y te lleva. All right, in Puerto Rico, go duérmete, niño, duérmete ya, que viene el cuco y te comerá. Oh, wait, maybe it's the whole thing. There it is down there. Yep, el cuco. Cuco, not el coco. Obviously, because coco is a coconut. El cuco in Puerto Rico. Such a sweet lullaby. Go to sleep, baby, go to sleep now, or the boogeyman will come and eat you. Just puts me right to sleep. Okay, una persona muy silenciosa. I wanted to bring this up because some people think he's referring to John Wick here, and some people think I'm referring to a man, so this needs to be silencioso. As soon as you say una persona, you're no longer describing John Wick, you're describing a person, okay? The thing that you're referring to is he's a quiet person. You're not saying he's quiet. That's different. If it was he is quiet, él es muy silencioso, because there the subject is a masculine person, right? Él es muy silencioso. As soon as we talk about una persona, everything that we are saying about that person and their person is feminine, because we're describing persona, not the person. Es una persona muy silenciosa, es una persona muy respetuosa. I could say about a man. It doesn't matter, because I'm not saying he is, I'm saying he's this kind of person. I'm describing the kind of person he is. Person's feminine. Everything that describes it must be feminine. Watch out for that. That's something that people tend to make a lot. A mistake that people tend to make. Un charlatan. I was like, I'll find it. I'm looking for this word. Charlatan. Someone who's chatty, who's a jokester, who's kind of, I don't know. I feel like it's a little bit of a showman type of personality, but the most consistent definitions I found were chatty or a jokester. I was talking about, but I was referring to the culture and that it's serious and in that part of the world. And I said, yeah, but I know of, I met a Russian man who was quite un charlatan, definitely alegre, very he was the most energetic and sort of outgoing of most people that I've brought or that I've met up with in San Juan area. We were walking around Viejo San Juan and he was there the whole time, dancing, jumping along. He was having a great time. So certainly I think that that stereotype for that part of the world doesn't apply to everybody. I wanted to, Alfredo said this at one point, and I really wanted to just point it out because you're going to hear this quite a lot. It's something that, and it would sound so natural if you throw it into conversations. Plus, it's just the nature of like, I've given you guys a couple phrases so far on this podcast that are a reality of a second language speaker that you have to clarify. Sometimes you have to say, you know, if you've made a mistake or etc. So this is a good phrase. Pero a lo que me refiero es, or a lo que me refiero es que. What I'm referring to is, or it's kind of like saying what I mean is. Okay, when she goes, pero lo que quiero decir con eso, lo que quiero decir, what I want to say with that, but you hear this very, very commonly. It's supernatural. It's not formal, even though what I refer to might sound a little bit formal in English. It's just so commonly used here. A lo que me refiero es, and it's, again, if you wanted to sort of redirect or clarify what it is that you're saying, because sometimes we don't have the most direct way of wording things in our second language, here's a great phrase for you to have in your toolbox. A lo que me refiero es. But to what, right? The lo que is what. I'm referring to is, referring to, right? Here's the a forms the to part, and I can kind of use this as a little segue into grammar. Let me show this. A lo que me refiero es. I think that even in English, technically, we're not supposed to end with prepositions, saying something like, I don't have anyone to practice with, or what I'm referring to. That's what I was referring to right there. That would be to, period, or I don't have anyone to practice with, period. But no one, because it sounds incredibly formal and it would be weird in a conversation to say, I don't have anyone with whom to practice. Right? Or to what I am referring is, that is to which I am referring, something like that. No one would freaking say that. Okay, so, but in Spanish, you just can't end with prepositions. This can't be lo que eso es. Let's do it in the context of, that's what I refer to. Eso es lo que me refiero a. That can never happen in Spanish. So this a and any preposition that you're using with, to, or that you're working with, like the word with, to, from, of, whatever, has to go all the way before eso es a, lo que usually comes somewhere before que or quien or one of those words, right? This is why we use a donde vas. Where are you going to? The to has to come all the way at the beginning. Or you might see con quien vives. Who do you live with? The with has to go all the way before that first like question word, a donde, con quien, a lo que, con quien vives. No tengo nadie con quien practicar. No tengo nadie, I don't have anyone, con quien, with whom practicar, to practice. Okay, which is BS. If you're just making that excuse about Spanish, you have millions of Spanish speakers on the internet who are trying to practice their English. So get over your excuses. That's why the a comes all the way at the beginning. To which I refer is. That to which I refer is. Again, sounds so formal when you look at it like that, but it is oh so commonly used. Great one to have and great one to be able to recognize. Here, a lo que me refiero es. Okay, practice it. Practice saying it a little bit more quickly. Pero a lo que me refiero es que. Okay, I made a mistake here. I did not include the te, and I just wanted to clarify that. Plus, this is a fun phrase to have. No te quieres meter con John Wick. You don't want to mess with John Wick. Remember that meterte is like to get into something, so you don't want to get into it. You could think of it if you want to keep it closer to what the meter definition is, but it's like saying, know that it's what I would translate this to if I was speaking in English, or if I was having to do a direct translation and someone says in my ear, si no te quiere meter con John Wick, what I would translate it to is you don't want to mess with him. Okay. Te quieres meter con John Wick. And finally, as far as our vocab portion, I was referring to this series with Gordon Ramsay and his two best buds here. We got Gino De Campo and Fred, I forget his last name, Fred Frenchman. De ese corillo, I mentioned that Gordon was the only one from this group that speaks English natively. From that group, de ese corillo. Corillo is a slang word used in Puerto Rico to refer to a group of friends. Let me show y'all, just because I'm proud of my group of friends. Look at that. That would be mi corillo here. These are my, just some of, not the full group of my homies from college. Okay, this is mi corillo. Este mi corillo de la universidad. It is a group of friends. El corillo. All right, un complejo. I mentioned how, it's maybe you're all, it doesn't matter if you have an accent in the language, whatever. But I also mentioned that my second gen people are probably listening to me right now, like, yes, it does, because second and third gen people get treated horribly when they're trying to learn Spanish, as if they should speak it perfectly, even though they don't live in a Spanish speaking place, even though they didn't have their education in Spanish. It's some bullshit that people make you feel that way. And I'm so sorry if you're having to get over that complex. I've talked about in many videos I've done, a lot of content that I put out is about the mentality that you need to have in order to successfully learn a language. And the presence of doubt and self-consciousness, self-judgment truly blocks your brain's ability to access what it knows. That's the effect of emotions on the brain. That's the effect of anxiety on the brain. So just because your family or other Latinos have made you feel bad about Spanish, you already have a level of anxiety or un complejo about how you speak that makes it so that you can't speak as well as you'd like to, because they've planted this doubt in your brain. Words are so powerful and they can be like poison. So I'm so sad that you guys have had to face those experiences, but I hope that you can find something within you that is more powerful and more compelling than those negative comments you've gotten, and that helps push you through to be able to reconnect with the language that maybe you spoke, even was your first language as a kid, right? But then lost because your education was not in that language, your friendships were not in that language, and your jobs were not in that language. So it makes all of the sense in the world. But I mentioned un complejo, a complex self-consciousness. I feel like this is used more in Spanish than I would typically maybe use the word complex in English. And this next one that we're going to look at, calling somebody acomparejado. We don't have really a word like this, nor we say, oh yeah, she's got a lot of complexes. I mean, maybe, but I don't feel like it's so common as it is in Spanish. You will quite often hear people describe somebody as acomparejado or acomparejada, being somebody that just is very self-conscious. This I think is what we would more naturally say in English, than the self-conscious person. Great one here. Te sientes bien fuera de lugar. I use that phrase to talk about, Alfredo gave the same sort of comparison of maybe starting in the gym. Right off the bat, you feel uncomfortable. Te siente, and I jumped in. You feel out of place. Fuera de lugar. A fantastic phrase to have. I was so excited when I learned that this could work in this concept could work in Spanish as well. And here we have the verb to feel. Tú te sientes bien, really, is what I should. You feel really out of place, is what I'm missing here in the translation. Bien fuera de lugar, very out of place. Okay, me voy a recompensar. I'm going to reward myself. Recompensar is to compensate or to reward. If you do it to yourself, it becomes reflexive, right? So you need that me in there. Me voy a recompensar. If I was going to reward somebody else, it would be te voy a recompensar, right? I'm going to reward you. Or le voy a recompensar. I'm going to reward him or her. To compensate, to reward. All right, finally, for people that are looking at the subjunctive, you are going to learn the subjunctive, damn it. If it's the last thing I do, you need the subjunctive more than you need future tense. Why? Because you get around future tense the same way we do in English by saying I'm going to. tomorrow I'm going to meet up with a student. We'll have dinner, blah, blah. On Tuesday, I'm leaving for North Carolina. I'm going to spend a week with my family because my nephew is turning 1. All of those things are referring to future tense. Well, it would sound just like that in English, but notice I didn't use will be, whatever. I used going to. You do the same thing in Spanish. Voy a ir mañana. Voy a encontrarme con un estudiante. Vamos a cenar juntos. Vamos a cenar juntos. We're going to have dinner together. Juntas. We'll all be women there. Su mamá está ahí también. Y el martes salgo para North Carolina. Mi sobrino cumple o va a cumplir, going to turn, va a cumplir 3 años, un año el viernes. Okay. I use the subjunctive tense 8 times more than I use future tense. Okay. People come to me like, I need to know future, blah, blah. Future is like so low on your priority list. Work on the subjunctive. Here we go. Why? First example. Cuando la película ya pase a las aplicaciones. He was talking to, referring to, él estaba refiriéndose a when it goes to Netflix or Hulu or whatever, when you can stream it. Okay. But whenever cuando is pointing to a point of the future, okay, it requires the subjunctive. There's 2 different ways we use when. You use when for habitual actions, or you use when, I'm talking about like in future tense, right? Because you can say when in the past tense, but we use when to talk about habitual actions, or we say when to talk about a future thing. Let's look at the difference. When with habitual actions is like, when I go to the beach, I always bring a chair. When we go to the beach, we always look for a shady spot. So if it's going to be the feel of always in there, then you know it's a routine action. When I go to the gym, I have to have 2 towels. That's a habitual. That's what is supposed to be every time, right? I'm not talking about the future this afternoon. When I go to the gym this afternoon, I'm going to take it easy on my legs. My right leg still not feeling great. That is the most common and most plain use of the subjunctive. I had to use it today because I went and got blood work done, and I asked, when I go to get the results, do I give 2 last names so they get confused and it's wrong on my insurance card? What's the last name that I should give? Cuando busque los resultados. If I would have said to her, cuando busco, she says she's feeling like I'm talking about, oh, when I go look for, I'm not asking a question about what should I do in the future when I come back and look for my results. She would have been confused because I would have been speaking to her as if I'm talking about something habitual. Oh, when I go get my lab results, I always give them blah, blah, blah. No, I'm asking about on Monday or Tuesday when I come in, should I give, what last name should I give? So, cuando la película ya pase, that's coming from pasar. It has a subjunctive ending, so y, right? Por las personas que no hayan visto, Alfredo talking about the people who have not seen, who haven't seen the movie yet. That is, we don't know who's seen it or not. So we have to use hayan, the subjunctive. And look at what's going on in this sentence here. First, we see nosotros in command form, which nosotros in command form is simply adding let's to the verb that you're talking about, right? So esperemos is let's hope. Hablemos, let's talk. Seamos honestos, let's be honest. Seamos honestos. That's actually command form, although it looks just like the subjunctive, right? Does, but it's here we're looking at a command in nosotros. Let's hope that those los que escuchan, sorry. No, that's right. Esperemos que los que escuchen este podcast ya hayan visto blah, 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 Super Mario Brothers, okay? Let's hope that those that listen to this podcast have already seen. So we know that esperar que triggers a subjunctive, okay? We hope that they've listened to the podcast. This esperar que is triggering hayan visto. What he's doing here is another insert here. We're saying we hope that they've seen the movie. The in-between thought is we hope that those who listen to the podcast, which is again an unknown reality. We don't know who's listening. So los que escuchan, whoever might be listening to this podcast is what it feels like. Let's hope that whoever may be listening to this podcast have already seen. But this hayan visto is triggered because of esperemos que. Espero que hayas visto la película, porque voy a hablar de la película en el episodio de hoy. I hope that you have seen, espero que hayas visto la película, porque voy a hablar de la película de ella en el episodio de hoy. So that's where that's coming from. The insert in between is referring to whoever might be listening. I hope that those who might be listening have seen the movie. And that's like a bracket in between this clause. Okay. This part came up when I was talking about Gordon and his two buddies. Okay, so no hace falta que. When you use no hace falta, which is it's not necessary or it's not needed. Hacer falta que no speak to miss, but in this case, it's not needed. It's not necessary that you speak perfectly. No hace falta que always triggers subjunctive. No hace falta que hables perfectamente. Okay, Alfredo is referring to a future point here. He said, you could say, okay, rápido que aprenda el español, voy a hacer un viaje a España, o algo así. Rápido que aprenda, as soon as, that's kind of like saying tan pronto como aprendo, rápido que aprenda, is another, all referring to the same thing, which is like as soon as I learn, pointing to a future point, just like here. Okay, there's a lot of things that trigger this future use of the subjunctive, and it's hard to wrap your head around it at first. You'll try to use it where it's not used, but there's a great lesson on SpanishDict.com called in the subjunctive section. Let's go there real quick. This episode has been long, and I even have a class in a couple minutes, so we'll wrap up in a second. But let's look at subjunctive. The Spanish subjunctive, we need the one where it goes to present. And this part right here of conditional outcomes, that's what we're looking at when we see, look at the tan pronto, as soon as I arrive, as soon as I get there. Okay, so you can spend more time on this, and it's something that you just need to use, observe, and try to use many times before you really are solid on what sort of things in this kind of outcomes, what kind of this, what it is that triggers the subjunctive in this particular example. This is another one. After you learn, again, I use this one, después de que aprenda. It doesn't even have to be después de que aprendas, or después, I don't remember if I said it in tú or if I was speaking in. No tiene que ser que después de que aprenda español, because, what does it mean to learn Spanish? You're learning your whole life in your second language. You're learning in your first language as well. So I'm just thinking of that as like, reward yourself for your consistency rather than some level that you're holding yourself to getting to after a certain point of time. Okay, so after you learn, here's subjunctive, subjunctive, all over the place. Gracias. That has been all for today's episode. Just fabulous vocab in today's episode. So please write it down, listen to it again so that you see it used and you have one more connection to that new concept, that new vocab. Go ahead and listen to episodio 9 otra vez. Como siempre, síganme en las redes sociales. Give me a follow on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. It helps me immensely. Eventually be able to get paid for this time that I'm putting into this podcast that you're so grateful for. Aren't you? Thought so. The hair in my eye. Okay, have a wonderful rest of your week. Y nos vemos en la próxima.